Why is the focus on women so crucial?
Right. And I think that almost like naturally happened for us to be exposed to the women and women's association in the southern part of Costa Rica when we were starting. But I think also like the literature has really informed us the importance of working with women in general, especially in agriculture and what that means in the global context, right? So some of the data that we were able to kind of like learn in the very beginning of our organization were, done by IFAD and FAO, and they estimate there are around, 500 million smallholder farmers around the world who are responsible for about 80% of the food production globally, and that's like obviously beyond coffee. And in coffee alone, we estimate that there are about 12.5 million smallholder farms with over 60 million individuals working on this farm. So, it's just like a really large number of farming communities that we're talking about that are responsible for, the food production for us globally. And women's involvement varies by region, but oftentimes it's accounted for about 50% of these farms. So they are, a large part of the farming economy and like the role, the ecosystem, but oftentimes they're not necessarily visible, not only in coffee, but in general because of the structural barriers and social stigmas that exist that make it impossible for them to kind of like, raise their voice and, share their thoughts in this decision-making places, and also just kind of like sell their products at a better price. Some studies have shown us that women in general are earning, about 39% less than their male counterparts in the market. And that's often related to kind of the challenges and the hardships that we were mentioning earlier about, access to technical training, assistance, finance, in addition to the market. And I think in general, like agriculture is not really an easy field for any farmer, whether you're a coffee farmer or you're a rice farmer, for instance. The case for my grandmother, for instance, it's a really hard field because prices and climate change, as well as the market condition, haven't necessarily favored smallholder farmers in the most recent history. And women find themselves in like much more difficult position because of the social stigmas and the challenges that's added on top of it. And going beyond maybe the obvious reason why we need to work with women in agriculture, because that's just like the right thing to do to create an equitable and equal work environment for everyone. There's also like an economic case that we are reading a little bit more about in the recent, the history of like the development economies by the development economists and other fields where closing the gender gap is estimated to increase the farm's yield by 20 to 30% in general, and reduce the global hunger by 12 to 17%. So there are quite a lot of like studies that like point to the potential that women's involvement and increased women's involvement will have, not only in the context of the coffee industry, but in the context of like the global agricultural system, and also like like the well-being of everyone around globally. So I think there were like multiple like personal connections to it, but also I think in general it just makes sense for us to work with women in farms.
And there's definitely a lot of research too that suggests that when you invest in a woman, you're not just investing in her, but you're investing in everyone she encounters, because women just by nature will turn around and invest it into their children and in their communities. So I like to think of it as an investment that really pays dividends, because there's really a ripple effect that comes with that.